Join us here. Hello, Prof.
Hello, thank you, Kamani.
Right.
I can hear you.
Very well, thanks for joining us, and thank you too, Seth, for your time here. I'm going to start with you, and honestly, when the reports came out, President Mahama had made this call that we fulfill our promises. One of the first questions that were asked was, has the president fulfilled his own promises yet? When politicians come out and make those statements,
yes,
how well do you mean them when you make those statements, Seth?
Well, I think the president is somebody who comes across as somebody who is really a people-centered person. And for him making this call in a Pan-African conference, don't forget that Africa is gradually, changing. And therefore, we must make sure that the people for who we are in office are taken care of. I think it's a genuine call, and like the Chinese proverb says, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a step. And I believe that he's genuine in that call, and he's asking his fellow African leaders.
Has he been exemplary in that, on that path? Has he been exemplary? Has he lived that exemplary life, for lack of a better word, when it comes to fulfilling those statements politicians make?
Well, I think the president is on course in fulfilling his electoral promises that he gave the people of Ghana in 2012. And you can see all around the country that there is a lot going on in terms of development in the road sector, in the health sector, education, water and sanitation, and so on and so forth. So he is on course to fulfill the promises that he gave Ghanaians during the 2012 elections. Don't forget that he still has some time to complete his mandate. So I have a firm belief that by the time he completes his mandate, the first 4 years, he will fulfill, I think, majority, if not all of the promises.
Let's get over the telephone now and speak with Professor Amin Al-Hassan. I was telling you earlier, he's Director of Development and Communication with the Ghana Institute of Governance and Security. Prof.
Yes, I can hear you.
Hearing the President, John Dramani Mahama, say that, what interpretation did you make into that statement he made and the reality we have here in our country?
I think, thank you very much. I think we should get the idea that he was speaking to the occasion. First of all, he's gone to this conference of Pan-Africanists that are discussing inequalities. What else could he say? Now, having said that, what is very instructive about John Mahama's speech on this occasion was the fact that some of the successes he listed spans beyond his government into the NPP, which is a very, very progressive development in our body politic, that we are beginning to recognize the achievements of previous governments and current governments altogether as part of government efforts. Now, sincerely speaking, it is too early to start to find out whether President John Mahama has actually delivered on his promise. It is still too early for us to start judging. And we also have to come to terms with some of the realities of governance in this country. In actual fact, when you are not yet in government, you can make all kinds of promises. But once you are in government and you realize that more than half of your national budget is financed by donor support, it means that you are not really in charge. Your success or failure will be defined and determined by donor organizations, depending upon whether you are doing what they want. And this is exactly what is at the heart of governance issues in this country. John Mahama, with its limitations, I would say, is performing very creditably so far. And we have to give the credit for that. But the reality is that government and our presidents and politicians will come out and let us all understand the implications of having a national budget that is financed more than half of it by donor support. That is the issue.
I think we all agree here that the call is one in the right direction. Let's go beyond that now and then ask ourselves, for the everyday Ghanaian, having seen a number of elections, promises are made in manifestos, and after the 4-year mandate, or 8-year mandate, you don't seem to see a lot of those promises are made. The question now is, Seth, I'm going to start with you. Why should we believe that we could get to the point where indeed we are not just taken for granted as voters?
I think that the Ghanaian populace, that is the voter population in Ghana, and I believe in many other African countries, are beginning to mature in the sense that, you know, they are taking account of the kind of promises that people give when they go on the political platform. And believe you me, they are holding politicians to it. You can see in our own country how people are raising issues of promises that are made, especially that the president made about building 200 community secondary schools. People are asking questions already because they reckon that he must do that in 4 years and he has done nothing yet and all that. So people are actually asking the questions. But, you know, moving away from that, I'm saying that the whole world is changing, and Africa has no reason not to start thinking about changing. For example, the president, when he took office, has been actually preaching a value addition to our raw material, because you look on the continent, we supply most of the raw materials to the developed countries. And if we continue in that direction, we will always be hewers of wood and drawers of water, whilst those people create the needed jobs in their country. Now, adding value to our raw materials means that we will create sustainable jobs, and the economy will expand, and social services will get to the poor and needy and the vulnerable. So all this call is underpinning this kind of agenda, that Africa needs to look home and look at its raw material base and see how they can add value and make sure that they created the needed jobs for their population.
Professor?
Yes, I'm here.
Can the politician do without making promises?
Well, politics everywhere in the world is not only an African or Ghanaian issue. Politics all over the world. What Peter just said is very important, that Ghanaian electorate is becoming more mature about these issues, and they are beginning to decipher who are lying and who are deceiving them and who are capable of delivering. And I think that is important for our democracy. So, we have just started democracy. We are going into our third decade of an attempt at democracy. We have finished 2 decades of it. And I think clearly what we are seeing is that the electorate is becoming more mature about who is telling the truth. And for us, we should be very thankful that the issue of politicians who will not tell the truth will soon be a thing of the past when Ghanaians are able to figure out who to vote for. Having said that, I think that politicians will always make promises everywhere. We shouldn't get away from that.
How important? I was hoping that you would elaborate on that, because then we need to draw the line when a promise is becoming exaggeration, when a promise is becoming a take for granted word, to when it actually is something that can be fulfilled. So for that voter who we now say can decipher, what should we look out for?
I think what we are hoping will happen soon is the strengthening of civil society institutions that would hold government accountable. Promises that are made during elections and how these promises are being adjudged to haven't been fulfilled will be something that a strengthened civil society will be able to hold government to task. And I am seeing gradually a certain development around it. For example, you will realize that when government came out and talked about in the initial days about SADA, we saw how some civil society organizations came out and responded to it. And in other areas of the economy, we begin to see how communities are holding politicians to task. That development, the strengthening of civil society institutions that will be able to record the promise and play it back at the appropriate time, is what we are expecting to see develop in our country. And I think we are on course. We might be in a hurry, but in natural fact, when we look at the timeline we have, one would say that so far we are having a progressive development of civil society institutions that are beginning to wise up and to tell government and politicians, government officials and politicians that we are listening to your promises and we will hold you to task when the time comes.
Absolutely. Prof, I'm going to say thank you at this point. A pleasure talking to you. Professor Amina Hassan is Director, Development and Communications with the Ghana Institute of Governance and Security. However, I still have Seth Clyde here in the studio with me. He's a member of the NDC and also Director for Precious Metal Marketing.
Former director.
You're
a former director.
Former director.
Executive director.
Executive director for the Precious Metal Marketing Company. Thank you very much for that correction there. But you're also a politician. I'm more interested in that, being a member of the NDC. When you say things to voters, you make promises to them. What exactly goes into that?
I think basically promises that politicians make are promises that can be fulfilled. And by and large, they normally will take into account when drawing up their manifesto things that they can do.
My concern is you make promises without giving out the plan you intend to follow. You make promises without taking into cognizance the challenges of the economy at that time and even how you would solve that problem before getting the necessary support you'd need to fulfill those promises. And then you get into office and now you can't fulfill those promises.
In most cases, it's the opposition parties that fall prey to that kind of system. But where there is a government in place, like the current NDC government, it was after the demise of our late president that President John Mahama took over. So he well knew what is doable, and all the promises that he gave, I can tell you, is doable, and I am very sure that he will fulfill those promises. But having said that, I just want to add to Professor's assertion about the fact that once civil society gets, wise up and is holding politicians to account, we will see an improvement in this kind of phenomenon. But I also want to add that the media has a very, very important role to play in this direction, because you also can pick up all those promises and keep on asking questions persistently about how those promises are going to be fulfilled, where we are in the fulfillment of those promises. And therefore, the politicians will know that they cannot take the people for granted when they are making promises that they think or know cannot be fulfilled.
Absolutely, and we also hope that the RTI will be passed quick enough, because that will also is the lubricant for the machine we are running at the moment. Thank you very much, Seth, for your time.
You're welcome.
Seth Clyde is a member of the NDC. Let's stay